Hey everybody, this is Ryan McClanahan with HistoryThroughCards.com. Hope you're all doing very well today. While I was at the Lucky's Boston show about 2 weeks ago, I came across a 1933 Gaudi of Pete Scott, and I know that name. Several years ago, in fact, I was doing some research on the 1923 Baltimore shirts, Kansas City Blues, and it's a kind of a rare set. I've actually never seen one in person, although I have seen one online, but that's not really the same thing as I've told you guys in the past. However, um, Pete Scott's name is on that set list in the checklist, and he does have a card as well as Bill Skiff. And both of these guys have a really interesting history, if you will. And I wanted to cover that today with you guys because I think you're going to find it absolutely fascinating. And I want to also cover what happened after a certain incident with these guys in 1924. And they both of them did play in the major leagues at one point or another. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what happened during this real now forgotten incident and how it affected their career afterwards. So here we go. This is from the Kansas City Star, Kansas City, July 8th, 1924. A probe in girl's death. The statement of Bill Skiff. My name is William Franklin Skiff. I am 28 years old and a ball player by profession. On the night of July 7th, about 10 p.m., 4 girls came into my room at the Radisson Hotel and visited for some time. Pete Scott was there with me. They remained for some time. Among these girls was 2 named Blanche and June Pierce, who remained with the other parties for some little time. Blanche left the room, and the other girls remained for some time. When the other girls started for their rooms, they commenced to look for Blanche. Thinking she had gone to the other room, they were unable to find her. She was found in the elevator shaft where she had fallen. I started to leave to go out for a short time when I was told of the accident and remained in the hotel. I do not know how Blanche happened to fall down the shaft. I will say positively that Blanche was not drunk. She had drunk scarcely anything. I have learned since that she died from the injuries she received when she fell down the elevator. Signed, William F. Skiff. The statement of Pete Scott. My name is Floyd Peter Scott. I am a ball player by profession. I live at Stockton, California, and I am stopping at the Radisson Hotel at the present time. On the night of July 7th, I, with some friends, were in my room at Above Place. Among them was a lady named Blanche Pierce and her sister June, whom I have known for some time. They came to the hotel to visit some friends, and while there, came to our room. They were there a short time when Blanche Pierce disappeared. We thought she had gone to one of the other girls' rooms, but upon looking, found she had fallen down the elevator shaft. I am unable to tell how she came to fall down the elevator where she was found, as it was a freight elevator, and to the best of my knowledge, did not know there was a freight elevator in the building. This was purely accidental, as there was no trouble of any kind around our room or any other place around the hotel that I know of. Our rooms are on the 10th floor, and I don't know what floor they did find her on. Signed, Floyd Peter Scott. The 2 players suspended. William Skiff, catcher, and Pete Scott, outfielder, were suspended indefinitely this afternoon by George E. Muhlbach, owner of the Blues, when the two players reported at the ball field. Mr. Muehlbach said that he was not fully informed of what transpired last night at the Radisson Hotel and was not passing judgment on the two members of his ball team, but desired the incident to be cleared up entirely before permitting Skiff and Scott to play again. The coroner's office has decided on an inquest in the death of Miss Blanche Pierce, who died early today at the General Hospital from injuries received in a fall down the flight elevator shaft at the Radisson Hotel, 911 Holmes Street. The inquest will begin at 10 o'clock Thursday morning. William Skiff, catcher, and Pete Scott, outfielder of the Kansas City Blues, and several other occupants of the apartment hotel have been questioned by the police. Statements have been taken from Skiff, Scott, Miss Edna Nussbaum, and Miss June Pierce, a sister of Blanche Pierce. None was held by the police. Visiting in players' rooms. The Pierce sisters and Mrs. Nussbaum and Mrs. Marie Smith, according to statements given to the police, had been visiting in the rooms of Skiff and Scott. The accident occurred about 1 o'clock this morning. Skiff and Scott, roommates, have a room on the 10th floor of the hotel. They returned yesterday with the Blues from a month's tour on the other cities of the American Association. The Pierce sisters, who have a millinery shop in a department store at Madison, Kansas, went to the Radisson last night to visit Mrs. Nussbaum and Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith, according to the statement of June Pierce, invited them to go to the room of Skiff and Scott. Blanche Pierce left party. The four joined the ball players shortly after 10 o'clock, according to Mrs. Nussbaum's statement. Blanche Pierce did not remain as long as other members of the party, the statements indicated. Her absence was not noted until the report of the accident was given to the members of the party by Mrs. Edith Henry, manager of the hotel, shortly after 1 o'clock. Mrs. Nussbaum said in her statement that was after the party had ended. Mrs. Nussbaum said, June Pierce did not know her sister had met with an accident until she was called to the General Hospital to identify the body. Her statement indicated she fainted and became hysterical at the hospital. The nature of the party in the ball players' rooms was not disclosed in the statements. Statements were uniform in saying the party began shortly after 10 o'clock and terminated before 1 o'clock when the accident in the elevator shaft was reported. Bill Skiff mentions liquor. Liquor was mentioned only in Skiff's statement. He said Blanche Pierce had drunk a little liquor, if any at all. The other statements did not describe any drinking. Miss Pierce was found on top of the cage of the elevator by W.H. Cork, manager of the dining room. He heard a crash and started to enter the elevator to investigate on the upper floors. The elevator car was on the first floor. Cork, unable to remove the injured woman, called for help. Miss Pierce was placed in a taxi cab. An ambulance was not called at once. The taxi cab driver, Arthur Morris, said the girl was refused admittance at 2 hospitals, the attendants directing him to the General Hospital. No quarreling, Schiff says. There had been no quarreling among members of the party, Skiff told the police. He had known the 4 women for some time. June Pierce arrived last night from Madison. Blanche Pierce had been staying at the Penn Hotel, 904 Penn Street. The father is A.W. Pierce of Rodendale, Missouri. June is 18 years old. Her sister was 27. Paul Springer and William Stevensow, detectives assigned to investigate the case, interviewed all of the principals in the party today. Skiff and Scott were still in bed at 10 o'clock when the detectives knocked on the door. June Pierce had spent the night with Mrs. Nussbaum and Mrs. Smith in apartment 512 at the Radisson. Mrs. Smith, a stenographer for an oil company, and Mrs. Nussbaum, employed in a beauty parlor in the studio building, did not go to work today. Skiff and Scott told the detectives they knew nothing of Miss Pierce's accident until summoned by the police early this morning. She was sitting here with the rest of us, Skiff said. She made no comment when she left the room. No drinking at the party. The ball players said today that their visitors had left the room at midnight or before. They denied that there had been any drinking at the party. Mrs. Nussbaum said today she and Mrs. Smith were in the ball players' apartment when the Pierce girls arrived at the hotel last night. The attendant directed the two milliners to the ball players' room, where they found Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Nussbaum. June Pierce said the three women said no liquor was served. It was not known from what floor Mrs. Pierce fell into the freight elevator shaft. The doors, unless opened wide, close automatically. No door was found open after the accident was discovered. The police believe Miss Pierce fell from the 10th floor. The elevator doors can be opened from the hallway or from the inside, detectives found. The door to the elevator and one to the rear stairway are side by side. A sign on the elevator door says, "Please close the door," unquote, may have caused Miss Pierce, who was not familiar with the hotel, to believe she was entering the stairway or perhaps another room, the detectives believe. Edna Nussbaum's statement. Edna Nussbaum made the following signed statement to the police. My name is Edna Nussbaum. I live at the Radisson Hotel. I am 25 years old. I have lived there for about 4 months. I have known Blanche Pierce since last summer. Blanche and her sister June came to Kansas City from their home in Madison, Kansas, and came over to the Radisson Hotel to visit someone. I had never met Blanche's sister until tonight. I was visiting in Pete, Scott, and Bill Skiff's room when these girls came up. We remained there for a few hours, and when I got ready to go to my room, I missed Blanche and thought she had gone downstairs. I went to my room when Mrs. Henry, manager of the hotel, came to my door and told me the girl that had been upstairs was injured and that the officers wanted her sister and myself to go to the hospital to see if it was Blanche. We went to the officers to the hospital, and on the way out there was one of the officers who told me Blanche was dead. We went into the hospital and I identified the body as that of Blanche Pierce. I think the fall was purely accidental, as there had been no quarrel of any word or any kind between any of the parties in my presence. I make this statement of the death of Blanche Pierce because it is the truth as far as I know. June Pierce's statement. Miss June Pierce, sister of the girl who was killed, made the following statement to the police. My name is June Pierce. I am 18 years old and live at Madison, Kansas. I came to the city last night and was stopping at the Penn Hotel. Last night we went to the Radisson Hotel to visit some friends. While at the hotel, my sister Blanche Pierce and I went down to Bill Skiff and Pete Scott's room, where there were several other parties. We remained there a short time and missed Blanche. We looked for her in the hotel and were unable to find her. I did not know what had happened to my sister until some woman in the hotel said someone had been hurt in the elevator. I did not know where Blanche went after she left the room occupied by Skiff and Scott until nearly an hour later. I know nothing of the accident until the woman in the hotel told me about it. I don't know how Blanche happened to fall down. I have known parties that live at the hotel for some time, but just met Mr. Skiff and Mr. Scott last night. There was no trouble of any kind around the hotel last night. I make this statement of the accident and death of Blanche Pierce at the Radisson Hotel because it is the truth. W.H. Cork, an employee of the Radisson Hotel, told the police, "My name is W.H. Cork. I live at the Radisson Hotel and have charge of the dining room. This morning, about 1 a.m., I was in the dining room cleaning up when I heard a crash. Thinking someone was trying to break into the storeroom, I went to investigate and discovered someone had fallen down the elevator. The elevator was standing at the first floor. Someone was on the elevator, the top of the elevator being even with the second floor. I opened the door and found it was a woman. I tried to get her out, but was unable to do so and called for help, and Mr. McLandish came to my assistance. We immediately took her out and placed her in a taxi and took her to the hospital. We were refused admittance at 2 hospitals and finally took her to the general hospital where she died." C.O. Jones, owner of the Radisson Hotel, said today the hotel company knowingly permitted no drinking of intoxicants in the rooms of the guests. "We can't watch every one of our guests," Mr. Jones added. "We expect them to conduct themselves properly. The death of Miss Pierce was regrettable. Our hotel detective makes the rounds of the various floors nightly, and he heard nothing to indicate there was any improper party in the rooms of Mr. Skiff and Mr. Scott. I want the public to understand the Radisson Hotel is conducted cleanly. Elevator doors in bad shape. A child could open them," the deputy coroner says. C.O. Smith, deputy coroner, who made an investigation at the Radisson Hotel for Dr. Chet McDonald, said the doors on the rear elevator shaft in which Miss Blanche Pierce met death early today following the party in the apartment of William Skiff and Pete Scott were in bad shape. There were no lock on the doors, Smith said. A child could open any of the doors without much effort. All of them are in bad shape in the respect. A milliner at Madison, Kansas. Blanche Pierce operated a department at Graham's store. Blanche Pierce, born and reared at Rosendale, Missouri, worked 2 years at the Hirsch Millinery Company in Kansas City before coming here last August with her sister June to operate the millinery department in Graham's department store. The girls left here for Kansas City to buy fall hats. Their father lives in Rosendale. Their mother is dead. 3 other sisters survive. This is from the Kansas City Post, July 11th, 1924. Players are anxious to get back in game. Pete Scott and Bill Skiff, exonerated yesterday at the coroner's inquest into the death of Blanche Pierce, were anxiously watching the rain clouds today, fearful that rain might postpone their return to the lineup after being reinstated. "We're both mightily anxious to get back into the game," Skiff said, with one eye on the splashers of rain that fell on the window. "When the team is winning, it isn't so bad to be forced out of a game or two, but when you feel that you might help the team, it's terrible to be held out. We regret the accident to Miss Pierce and the fact that we are drawn into the matter, but now that it is clear that we really had no connection with the accident, we want to get back to work as soon as we can help Doc Lavin make a winning team out of the Blues. Pete Scott admitted that the last few days had been a great strain and that both still were much depressed at the death of Miss Pierce, but expressed pleasure that the fans knew that he and Skiff had not been in any way connected with the accident. The Kansas City fans have been more than decent to all of us, Scott said, and I'm glad to know that we were not guilty of anything. A thing of this kind makes you realize how important your work is, and I know two of the Blues that are going to work like dogs helping Doc Lavin put the Blues back in this race. I hope nothing will delay our first appearance in the lineup. Stengel was a personal favorite of Del Webb. Casey had the background, her husband said. People forgot that he was an outstanding center fielder for the Giants. He hit a home run in the 1920s that beat the Yankees in the World Series. With all of his clowning, he knew his stuff. He would sit in a room and talk with you, and you could tell. On the third finger on his right hand, Skiff wears a large ring with a diamond-shaped stone, the Yankees' 1949 World Series ring. He helped scout the opposition that year and did so in the ensuing 4 years as the Yankees racked up a second of 5 straight World Series victories under Stengel. You won't see that again, Bill Skiff said proudly. Retired since 1970, he is still a loyal member of the team, while noting that it was a whole new ballpark and a whole new Yankee style today. It was a power team, but you could seldom see a Yankees squeeze. Now it's bunting, hit and run. It's a different club altogether. And how do things look for the remainder of the season? A light came into Bill Skiff's eyes. Well, that Kansas City club is going to be tough to beat. Rivers and White don't have the strongest arms, and Munson is an erratic thrower. I'm gambling on Billy Martin juggling players to outsmart them and win. If we get by them, Bill Skiff said, you'll see us in the World Series. You'll notice he said us. This is from the Press and Sun Bulletin, December 26, 1976, Birminghamton, New York. 3-time trip skipper Bill Skiff dies at 81. Bill Skiff, 3-time Birminghamton triplet manager in professional baseball's days here, died yesterday morning in New York. He was 81. Skiff spent 55 years in pro baseball as a catcher, manager, farm director, and scout, mostly with the New York Yankee organization, before retiring in 1970, at which time he was a Milwaukee Brewers scout. The longtime Bronxville resident managed the Yanks' Triple Cities farm in 1936, second, and 1937, fourth, then returned to the 1951 Eastern League, succeeding George Selkirk, that would be George Twinkletoes Selkirk. In between, he was considered in the running for the Major League Club job in 1949, when instead Casey Stengel was selected. His 1951 spring training roster included 19-year-old Mickey Mantle, but Mantle's spectacular spring with the big club was such that he never got to the Triplets or Austinburg, South Carolina camp, though till opening day in the majors, Skiff continued to assure Birminghamton newsmen covering the camp that he was confident Mantle would soon be sent to him. In contrast to the grizzled veteran manager that spring, the Yankees had to make a last-second change and sent a brand-new business manager to camp, who'd been working in the secretarial duty in the Yankees' office after answering a want ad. He was Johnny Johnson, now right-hand man to Commissioner Bowie Kuhn. Skiff's players in 1951 included pitcher Bob Grimm, whose next season was as American League Rookie of the Year. Bonus rookies who broke in under him that year included Bill Skiff and Johnny Blanchard, the latter in the over his head on arrival from Minneapolis high school graduation. One night, Blanchard did manage a triple and Skiff, coaching third base, offered a paternal, "Nice going, young man." The shy 17-year-old's response was, "Thank you, sir." In the remaining years of the Yankee dynasty of that era, he often was the super scout assigned to bird-dogging the Yankees' likely World Series opponent through September. One of his latter visits to Birminghampton was to scout Rob Gardner, a Central High senior. A kindly soft-spoken man, Skiff had the gnarled, knobby hands that testified to his years behind the plate. Though not a hitter of note, it was his home run off Lefty Grove that gave Kansas City's American Association champions victory over the invincible Baltimore Orioles of the International League in the final game of the 1923 Little World Series. Skiff's wife, Dolly, died August 29th. He is survived by two children, William Jr. and Miss Gertrude Lapham. This is from the Stockton Evening and Sunday Record, Stockton, California, February 2nd, 1933. Pete Scott to play for Oaks in 1933 season. Local outfielder will replace Blackberry for Acorns. Floyd Pete Scott, Stockton's ranking outfielder, was in Oakland today discussing final adjustments in his contract before affixing his name to an agreement to play ball for the Acorns during the forthcoming Pacific Coast League campaign. Vic Devensinskal, vice president of the Oaks, announces that Scott had practically agreed to terms in previous conferences with the owners of the club, and he feels certain that the Stockton veteran, with 11 years of major and minor league experience behind him, would be roaming the pastures in an Oakland uniform throughout the 1933 season, just so that Scott will not complain because of a lack of work. DeVincenskill is inserting a clause in his contract requiring Pete to play a certain number of games during the season. Takes place of George Blackerby. Manager Ray Brubaker is planning on using the sturdy right-handed batsman in left or right field as a successor to George Blackerby, who was traded to the Portland Ducks for shortstop Meyer Chosen. Scott is a colorful outfielder as well as a heavy sticker, and if he takes the game as seriously this year as he has promised, he should more than fill the shoes of Blackerby. Scott made his bow in professional ball in 1922 with the Kansas City club of the American Association. He took part in 97 games and hit .330. He remained a member of the Blues until he reported to Chicago Cubs of the National League in 1926. The Blues had sold him for the first time in 1924 to Washington, but he refused to report. It was in his major league bout with the Cubs that Scott had his poorest season at bat, but in 1927 he hit .314 in 71 games for the Windy City team. He was with Pittsburgh in 1928 and in 1929 was shifted to the Mission Reds. The Reds sent him to Reading for 1929, and he compiled his best average by meeting international pitching for 159 hits and an average of .349 in 130 games. Had fine year with Seattle. The Reds brought him back to the Coast League for the 1931 season, and he spent about half time on the bench. Last season, he was going along at a great clip for Seattle when President Bill Klepper wanted him and accepted a big salary cut, which he refused to do. He was then made a free agent. Official league averages for 1932 show that he played an errorless game in the outfield and in 103 games. This is the Stockton Evening and Sunday Record, May 4th, 1953. Scott, former baseball star here, called Daly City, May 4th. Floyd John Pete Scott, 55, former National and Pacific Coast League outfielder, died yesterday of a heart attack. Scott, a native of Woodland, was an employee of Transforeign Racetrack when he died. He played for the Chicago Cubs in 1926 and 1927, for the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1928, and then for several years with the old San Francisco Missions of the PCL. Funeral services will be held at 10 a.m. Wednesday. Scott's widow, a daughter and a brother, and 2 sisters survive. Scott attended St. Mary's College and later played with the Sperry Flower Baseball 9 of Stockton, which was the top semi-pro club in Central California for many years. He lived in Stockton at various times during his extended career in professional baseball and, more recently, made his home in the Oakdale district where he owned a livestock farm. Pete probably missed his greatest opportunity for fame in 1924 when he was sold by the Kansas City Blues of the American Association to the Washington Senators, who were in the thick of the fight for the American League pennant. Scott refused to report unless he received a portion of the purchase price, and the deal was called off. Washington purchased outfielder Earl McNeely from the Sacramento club and went on to win the Flag and the World Series from the New York Giants. It was McNeely's single that decided the series. Scott played with the Mission Reds of San Francisco in the Coast League under manager Wade Killefer in 1929, 1930, and 1931, and was noted for being a hustling ball player. Scott was confined to a Stockton hospital for a couple of weeks last year with a high fever, but seemingly made a complete recovery. This is something that I really hadn't heard about in a long time. I don't think anybody really has dived into this story of Pete Scott and Bill Skiff. And unfortunately, the girl, Miss Pierce, she did fall down 10 stories into this elevator shaft. And I was really kind of suspicious. How does something like that actually happen? They said that there was hardly any drinking going on, but there was some form of alcohol, which during the Great Depression was illegal, but people got around that. And that's a whole different story altogether, I suppose, but it did probably factor in greatly just how inebriated was this girl or those ball players or the party in general. We just don't know, but everybody got around the fact that there was a prohibition on alcohol, and we know how that turned out not well. I think there were more injuries and more deaths due to people brewing their own alcohol through wood grain alcohol and other additives, and it made a lot of people go blind, actually. It was something that we really need to learn from. When you ban a product or something that people want, they're going to find another way to go about getting that product. Banning things never really works out very well. But I wanted to find out a little bit more about Pete Scott here and Bill Skiff. Now, Pete Scott does have a 1933 Gaudi, which you guys can get pretty easily. I just picked this up, actually. And so I really love the 1933 Gaudi set. It's a great set, and I've written 2 articles on 1933 Gaudi and 1934 Gaudi, and I'm actually thinking about writing a book probably next year. in fact, on both of these sets and Gaudi in general, because it's just a fascinating set and a company, and it is actually, I think, one of the defining sets of the 20th century. And I'll show you the back. If there are any newbies here, you guys might want to add at least one 1933 Gaudi. But this one is kind of interesting because he is on the Oakland Oaks, and it is his last year in the the minor leagues. The Pacific Coast League really was considered the third league. It has an amazing history behind it and some really great ball players. A lot of those ball players said that they actually preferred the Pacific Coast League because they could play more often, and it was mostly in California. So Bill Skiff, he does have cards out there. They're not easy to find. He's on a 1943 Seattle Rainiers team set of Centennial Flower, which that company issued cards from like 1943 to 1945. Those I have seen at shows on occasion. You can find them. They're not the easiest things to find, and they're a little bit over sized, so you might want to keep that in mind. But they are really neat. And the Seattle Rainiers have a really great history behind them as well, which I really kind of enjoy doing research on the Pacific Coast League and some of these ball players and clubs. The 1923 Baltimore Shirts St. Louis Blues set is really very difficult. I'm not sure entirely how rare it is. I may have come across like one card, but I have seen them online. But like seeing a card online and seeing it in person are two completely different things. And those particular cards, they may look really boring to a lot of people, but if you're into, say, the St. Louis Blues as a team, that may be something that you might be interested in. Again, the rarity and the price, they might not, well, they might be a problem for for some collectors just because they're not flashy cards. But both of these ball players are included in that set, as well as several other pretty famous ball players. And I really wanted to cover this too, and I wanted to find out more about the victim of this accident, which is really unfortunate, and kind of find out who she was. I couldn't find a photo, unfortunately, to show you guys. I don't think one exists. It would have been nice. But I also wanted to find out, too, if that incident affected these guys' careers afterwards. And, Skiff spent very little time in the major leagues. And I don't think that it really did affect them. I think Pete Scott was... In the press, it made him look like he was very difficult to deal with to begin with. And he did miss out on the 1924 World Series because he refused to report to the Washington Senators. And obviously it affected him because he missed out on a World Series when that was a very good Senators team. And the Senators went back to the World Series in 1925, and unfortunately they lost. And then, again, they went to the World Series again in 1933, and they lost against the New York Giants. But this is a story that I really haven't heard anywhere else for the most part. It's kind of been buried or lost to time, and I wanted to make sure that at least these guys' stories are rehashed, and same with Miss Pierce too, because she deserved her story to be told as well. So guys, I'm gonna leave it there. Thank you so much. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about this story or these players. Let me know in the comment section below, and I will talk to you in another video. Have a good one. Bye.